it's the evening at Eedy's, or the next morning, it's not clear. Either way, Syril's eating the cereal again. I wondered if this was another form of moping, like a teenager who won't leave their room and only wants to eat Cocoa Pops for 4 days. But he clearly finds it somewhat unappetizing, so I actually think this is her work, part of her infantilization campaign. Especially if it is the evening, which for some reason I'm convinced it is. I know we've just had some evening scenes in this episode, but they're on different planets, so that doesn't necessarily follow. While the earlier breakfast scene displaced decision-making outward, this one returns with the consequences of that displacement already settled, already interpreted, and already weaponized. The first line establishes the power geometry immediately. I needn't tell you how wrong you were about Uncle Harlo opens with a verdict. The phrasing presumes Syril's error as fact before any detail is supplied. The content of the call is secondary. What matters is that Syril's doubts have been retroactively invalidated. His reply, "But you will," recognizes this dynamic. He's acknowledging that narration itself is now an instrument of control. Eedy's report of Uncle Harlo's opinion is tellingly indirect. She distills his view into a single evaluative judgment. Police work was never Syril's chosen path. The wording subtly removes agency from Syril while appearing to describe it. If it was not his chosen path, then his failure is reframed not as incompetence or injustice, but simple misalignment, a moral error rather than a procedural one. Syril's sarcasm, "'cause he knows me so well," attempts to challenge the authority of this assessment, but Eedy immediately converts that challenge into culpability. And whose fault is that? Knowledge gaps become Syril's responsibility. Her next line, "Perhaps you'll study Uncle Harlo with more energy in the future," is brutal. Relationships are framed as curricula. Influence is something to be researched, cultivated, and optimized. It's not maternal advice, it's elite social instruction. Eedy isn't offended that Syril lacks intimacy with his uncle, she's disappointed that he's failed to manage an asset. When Syril asks what field Uncle Harlo thinks he should pursue, he appears to be seeking clarity, albeit with a healthy dose of doubt. What he receives instead is delay. Eedy reports that Harlo wanted to think about it. The decision is deferred, but the hierarchy is reinforced. The absence of an answer keeps Syril in suspension. The most revealing passage comes in Eedy's account of how she described Syril's downfall. She tells Harlo how sorry he was. She stresses that the mistake was large enough to be deeply educational. Failure, epic failure, is reclassified as pedagogy. Punishment is reframed as growth. Eedy harmonizes with the system that rejected Syril. His response that he overheard her side of it briefly punctures the illusion of benevolent mediation. The call wasn't private. His life was discussed audibly, narratively, and unilaterally. Yet even this intrusion does not restore his footing. Eedy shows no embarrassment, no recalibration. The breach is irrelevant because consent was never part of the process. Her final line, "He knows how much we're counting on him," completes the scene's logic. The plural pronoun is crucial. "We" binds Syril to Eedy's strategy whether he agrees or not. Counting on Harlo is framed as necessity. The emotional weight of hope is shifted upward, away from Syril's agency and towards an absent benefactor whose goodwill must be earned. His future is now subject to deliberation elsewhere, narrated by someone else and justified in language he didn't choose. What presents as maternal advocacy is, in practice, administrative custody. The final time we see Syril in this episode, he's a man alone, in the dark, with a single object of focus. Captain Drachma is fixated once more on his arc whale. The holo projector is held close, he cradles it. Cassian's face rotates slowly, glowing in the dark. The object of his focus is a person who now exists for him only as an unresolved problem. Cassian's image is static, ghostly, and incomplete, order that has not yet been restored. Syril does not yet know how Cassian fits into his life, but he knows that he must. What the scene establishes is the redirection of Syril's need for structure. Deprived of institutional authority and domestically managed into passivity, his sense of purpose begins to reconstitute itself around pursuit. Cassian becomes a stabilizing axis. The scene ends without resolution but with alignment. Syril's future orientation, previously outsourced to Uncle Harlo and deferred indefinitely, snaps into a single silent focus. In the absence of permission, he finds an object. In the absence of authority, he finds a target. What his Episode 5 arc does to Syril is distillation. Everything external is stripped away until only the essential mechanism remains. The episode removes role, audience, and institutional context to see what remains once those supports are gone. And what remains is a very specific orientation toward order. Across the episode, Syril is repeatedly placed in situations where authority is present but inaccessible, environmental rather than human, procedural rather than negotiable, deferred rather than enacted. Crucially, he is never given a clear antagonist or a clean injustice to react against. Instead, he is left in proximity to systems that function without him. That absence is the pressure. Syril isn't reacting to cruelty, he's reacting to irrelevance. What becomes clear, taken as a whole, is that Syril does not need power in the usual sense. He needs legibility. He needs a world that can be read, evaluated, and made to make sense through the correct application of rules. When that world withdraws, when judgment is outsourced, delayed, or rendered atmospheric rather than explicit, his response is not rebellion or withdrawal but compression. He reduces the scale of the world until it fits his cognitive reach. That is why the episode keeps shrinking his field of action. When Syril stares intently at a piece of his cereal, I think it's a precursor to the scene where he's staring at Cassian's Hollow that evening. It's no accident that it looks like a little planet. He's thinking of Ferrix, the place that put him here. For a brief moment, he imagines it as puny in his powerful grip before discarding it with a plop. By the end, the only thing that remains fully comprehensible to him is a single tiny face, isolated from context, rotating endlessly, offering no resistance and no ambiguity. Cassian becomes meaningful because he represents a problem small enough to be solved, a failure that can be named, an error that can be corrected. By the end of the episode, he's used the last sliver of his agency to select a target, and realized that he no longer needs permission to enforce order in the galaxy.